Hello, everyone. Welcome to our recovery podcast where we talk about healing from childhood trauma. My name is Dolly. I am a licensed registered mental health practitioner and counselor, writer, life coach based in California. And our intention with my co host, Michelle, and I is to bring our wisdom, strength, experience, hope to your recovery journey. We want to provide you with support and wisdom and the lessons that we learned on our journey so that you can walk alongside in
Mm.
recovery with us. And yeah, hi Michelle, come on in.
Hi, Dolly. Yep,
Tell us
I
more.
was so engrossed with this intro because that's why I'm here too. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle, and so glad to be here. I'm an integration coach, creator of a body of work, Integration Arts, and I also have a flower essence business that supports deep integration and healing work. And yeah, this recovery podcast just is like one of the best things I'm doing right now. And why I'm here and why I'm really into this podcast is that I want to really normalize what it means to be a person who's grown up in a dysfunctional family, a household where addiction was, and to just normalize and be like, there's actually a lot of people out there
Yeah.
who are doing this. And this podcast is really a chance to, help you self-identify, but then also offer, as Dolly said, um, clear, digestible information on how you heal from this and how you recover. So I'm super glad to be here.
Yay, yay,
Yeah.
yeah. And I hope our listeners feel our dedication and commitment to the cause.
Hmm.
So, what are we discussing today? Today, we're talking about trait two from the
Trait
laundry
three.
list. So we've been exploring the laundry list trait, which is basically characteristics of an adult child. Adults who grew up in households that were dysfunctional, created adults who are still carrying on those dysfunctional patterns and going through life with so much pain and suffering. So
Mhm.
today, from that list, trait list, laundry list from the ACA, we are discussing trait two, which is on approval seeking and identity loss.
Yep. So trait two. We became approval seekers and lost our identity in the process. So, what is an approval seeker? Approval seeking is when you are constantly seeking validation, acceptance,
Hmm.
recognition from others to feel worthy. So, like the key here is you're looking outside of yourself
Yeah.
for something that must be generated inside of
From
yourself.
within,
So you
yes.
derive your sense of self from how others perceive you, what they're saying about you. And you often sacrifice your own needs
Hmm.
or your desires to gain that approval. It's like this exchange thing that you do.
Yeah.
Sacrifice myself, get the approval.
Hmm.
So what are your thoughts
Yeah,
on that? Yeah.
yeah, you're exactly right, right? Because it's such a coping mechanism to survive that dysfunctional childhood. It became our identity. Approval seeking became our identity. It became a habit. And
Mhm.
and we do it because we want to be accepted, validated. Validation, external validation is such a drug.
Yes.
So many times I sit with clients, and most of the time I'm showing them how to validate yourself. By me validating them, I show them how to validate yourself. But
Mhm.
ultimately, healing comes when you accept yourself, validate yourself, approve of yourself, and then let go of that fear of judgment, right? This approval seeking really comes from fear of being judged, fear
Mm.
of not being good enough,
Yep.
right? People pleasing behavior. So, what are some examples? How does approval seeking that we learned in childhood show up in adulthood?
Mm. I love that.
right?
Yeah, our approval seeking can look like kind of like obvious sometimes. It can also be very subtle. So it might look like you just naturally overcommit to tasks and
Mm.
responsibilities. And you may not know this, but it's like you're doing it to impress others. Even when you feel burnt out, it's like, okay, I'm on my last leg, but like, let me just do this thing because like it'll make them happy. That's the like conscious thinking. And then the
Hmm.
subconscious is more like, it'll give me that approval, which I'm dying for inside, you
Get
know?
that hit of validation and approval. It's almost
Yeah.
like that addiction. Like
Yeah.
you're saying, we could tell ourselves any reason, if I don't do it, it won't get done. But in
Hmm.
reality, you are compulsively
Hmm.
overdoing it to seek approval, validate in the hopes of, and you may not even get it. You
I
may not
know,
even,
that's the crazy thing.
right? You may not even get it, but you still people please. And then another one which I had was fear of speaking up. I was so
Mm.
scared of saying the wrong thing, or or hurting somebody, or
Yeah.
just not being accepted for my own true opinion. Because when I was a child, I had opinions. I had things to say and I was a truth teller.
Hmm.
And that what got people to shut me up. Like she just no, 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 we don't need your opinion.
Yeah.
And that's how I started disregarding my own opinions,
Hmm.
started started internalizing their rejection of
Hmm.
my opinions, my thoughts, my identity. I
Right.
started hiding behind the approval seeking, people pleasing
Right.
with that fear. Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
fear.
I love that. I love that so much. And I can actually really relate to that too in my own upbringing that the voice just
Hmm.
shut down over time.
Yeah.
And I think that's also like connected to, avoiding conflict. So what you were talking about was like, okay, like I'm not speaking up because the feedback I got was, no, you don't need to speak up. How many of us listening heard like, children should be seen, not heard?
Hmm. Hmm.
Like I
Yeah.
definitely experienced that growing
Yeah.
up. But then also like with the conflict avoidance when you become an adult, it's like, oh, I don't want to rock the boat. When I spoke
Hmm.
up when I was a kid, I received, feedback that trained me not to speak. So now in my adult life, I want to keep the approval with these relationships that mean so much to me. And so I'm going to avoid conflict. I'm not going to speak up. So that's another way that I can show up in your everyday life.
Yeah. Suppress your true feelings, avoid conflict, avoid confrontation, and carry on with this false facade of, I
Mhm.
have no needs. I live for other people. Look at me. I'm such a good person. Then
Mhm.
another one is compromising your personal boundaries, right?
Yes.
That great, that example that you gave earlier of overdoing it at your own cost,
Mhm.
saying, letting people take advantage of you, having no emotional boundaries, right?
Mhm.
Like back when I was a new medical professional, people just over I overgave, I should say. I shouldn't say they took advantage of me. I should say I overgave because I was trying to get approval, get acceptance, establish my own identity in other people's eyes. Isn't that
Mhm.
crazy how much we do to
Mhm.
see ourselves as worthy in other people's eyes?
I also just love the responsibility you took in that. Like that was like recovery in action, people. Like right there. Like they were like, what?
No.
Actually,
Yep.
I.
Yes, so
That
much.
was brilliant. I love that.
Right? That's like you're saying, magic of practicing
Yes.
recovery,
Yes.
right? Daily practice.
Yeah, I wanted to add one more in with regards to how this approval seeking behavior shows up. And
Hmm.
that is like the constantly asking for feedback and reassurance.
Oh
Like
my
we
God.
cannot forget about that one.
Yes. Oh
That
my
one is
God.
rampant with adult children. Just
Right.
that need for tell me something so that like I know I'm okay. Like this can
Mm-hmm.
show up in your romantic relationships.
Yes.
You might know this as like anxiously attached. And
Mm-hmm.
what we're also bringing through this lens in this recovery podcast is like the roots of an unrecovered adult child
Mm-hmm.
seeking that approval and needing the reassurance and the feedback. And can show up in your romantic relationships, but also at work, you know? You know,
Yeah.
needing like the good feedback from your boss to
Oh
feel
my
okay,
gosh.
like you're doing all right with your work. So,
Yeah, and when you don't get that extra praise and recognition, taking that as rejection.
mm-hmm,
Oh, he's not responding to my text, or my boss didn't respond to my email, or there wasn't this whole or this praise, and
mm-hmm,
this must mean I'm not worthy, I'm rejected. It's so quick. Like this is so quick
so
that we
fast.
go back to that default negative belief of if
Mhm,
somebody didn't give us overly praise us or give us that validation recognition, we're being rejected, we're not good
mhm.
enough, or I need to try harder.
Right.
It's such a cycle. It's such a
Mhm.
cycle. And
Yeah.
it consumes our lives.
Hmm. It
Like
really does.
so many people spend decades chasing somebody, trying to get validation from them in a romantic relationship, especially, that it's
Mhm.
heartbreaking. And I've been down that road as well. So,
Me too. Me too.
so
I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about that road in further episodes.
yeah. So, do we want to talk about how to heal? Are we talking about the flip side, or do we want to talk about
Well,
the
maybe we talk a
other?
little bit about like the identity piece because this trait has
Hmm.
like kind of two parts. You're an approval seeker, but then you also lose your identity in the process. And I just want to also refresh. We're going through traits of the laundry list, and the laundry list traits specifically are a collection of common traits that adult children of alcoholics or dysfunctional families exhibit as a result of their upbringing. So in this trait, it's got two parts. And so I think it would be great to just talk a little bit about that identity because I think it's like
Hmm.
kind of a buzzword, but
Yeah.
it's like, what does identity actually mean? And what does it mean to lose yourself and,
Hmm.
lose your identity? I know for me, it really like means that I no longer like know who I am
Hmm.
separate from the expectations and needs of others.
Yeah.
It's like they just become like glommed together. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, you need me to be this. This is who I am, right? How would you define, identity and then a loss of it?
So, identity is who we are at the core. It's
Hmm.
made up of our values, our preferences, our needs, wants, desires, our belief systems. The
Hmm.
core of how we operate
Hmm.
is our identity. And we
Hmm.
can perform many different roles, but our identity is one because
Hmm.
that's the core of who we are, defined by our principles, our values, our needs, wants, desires, lifestyle, etc. Right?
Yeah.
So when we lose our identity in two ways, one is we suppress it, we see somebody and we enmesh with them, we
Mm.
reject, we detach, we suppress, we desert, we leave our own identity, we betray our own truth, and then we just take on the modeling of someone else or
Mhm.
conditioning. So either
Mhm.
somebody else trains us to betray ourselves and lose our identity and
Mm.
accept their values, their morals, their principles, their opinions,
Mhm.
because it helps that person. They can
Mhm.
keep you in check and under control.
Mm.
Or you just enmesh and you just absorb the modeling. You absorb
Oh,
somebody else's identity,
I
right?
love that distinction so much. Because like I
Yeah.
often go to like, oh, I'm just like become like I'm just absorbing into the other person, but you
Yeah.
actually made me think of like, oh yeah, there can be this like authority figure going back to trait one
Mhm.
that keeps us in track. Like, oh no, this is how you need to be. So yeah, that's so brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we just blindly follow this other person. That's
Hmm.
what cultural conditioning is.
Hmm.
That's what parents do. Just blindly follow us and we'll lead you down we know better. So
Hmm.
you follow, I'm going to control you. You're my child. I'm going to keep
Hmm.
you safe, but then I'm going to tell you how to be in this world.
Hmm.
Right? That's how children at a very early age betray their true self and then
Hmm.
become a false codependent self
Yeah.
that has its own pattern, a false identity behavior, and its own set of problems, which is the laundry list
Yeah.
traits.
Totally.
And
Totally.
we're talking about them, yeah.
Yeah. So when you're like in a loss of identity, like what does that look like in everyday life? I know since I identify as an adult child and I work the steps and like work deeply with the laundry list traits, for me it was like um changing my opinions or preferences depending on who I was around, just
Yeah,
to
yeah.
avoid disagreement or gain acceptance.
Hmm. Yeah, me too.
This doesn't particularly resonate for me, but it can also look like, you're pursuing careers or hobbies or relationships based on expectations um, from family, society,
Yeah,
the close people around you, rather than your own personal passion or interest.
exactly.
What are some other ways that you've noticed losing your identity show up in everyday life?
Just compromising your values,
Mm-hmm.
doing things that don't align with your truth,
Mm-hmm.
such as eating what somebody else is eating, like you're saying, from big choices to small things, letting your schedule of your day, letting your mood being dictated by other person, absorbing other people's energy,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't not having the biggest way you can tell that somebody has identity crisis is when they don't know where they end and another person
Mm.
begins.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, they just go along to get along,
Hmm.
very afraid to express their opinion or speak up. They have no needs. That's
Hmm.
the biggest red flag. That's the biggest telltale sign of
Yes.
a
Yeah.
ACA codependent. I have no needs. I don't have any big feelings or opinions. I will change my truth
Hmm.
to get approval or
Hmm.
to avoid rejection. Just
Yeah.
living for other people.
Yeah. And I always, every time, I loved that, by the way. Every time I'm talking about this stuff, it always pops up in my brain like, don't forget that these were intelligent strategies that you grabbed onto when you needed to.
Yeah.
Like survival traits. Sometimes we call the laundry list a list of survival traits, you know?
Mhm.
And so if you're listening and you're like, oh, I really identify with this, and there's like this heavy feeling coming over you, just know like, oh, these traits were strategies, so that you could stay safe. And I use the word survive. It's kind of an intense word, and that doesn't necessarily mean that literally your life was at risk, although there are some adult children who experience that. But
Yeah.
like to live, like as little kids, we're like, we need to survive, right?
Hmm.
And so these are intelligent strategies that thankfully we don't have to use any longer, that
Yeah.
there's a way out. So,
That is the work. Unlearning of the patterns is
mhm,
the work. Checking your behavior and then doing the conscious thing, doing the aware thing,
mhm,
doing what recovery tells you, guides you to do.
yeah.
Right? We made these choices because we didn't have anyone guiding us back then. We
Mhm,
enmeshed, right? We
yeah.
enmeshed with our parents because they didn't have any boundaries and we didn't learn any boundaries.
Mhm,
And our survival was dependent on a really unpredictable, chaotic, emotionally unavailable, or
mhm,
emotionally unhealthy parent. Right?
yeah.
So, what is a child supposed to do if there's an unavailable or angry parent
Mm,
not providing you with the basic spiritual, emotional, mental, physical security?
yeah. You gotta
Right?
figure out how to make it work.
Yeah, yeah, and parent-child enmeshment does so much harm.
Mm,
because you just become mini me. Like whatever the parent says or desires or models, you just become that as a result of enmeshment.
yeah, totally. I I'm glad you brought up the enmeshment because, this trait can go in a different direction too. Because we know like what we're doing with this episode is like unpacking these traits, and there's like the laundry list trait, and then there's the other. So maybe we should talk about how this trait can go in the opposite direction, which is the other laundry list
Hmm.
to avoid becoming enmeshed and entangled, which is what you were just talking about.
Yeah.
To avoid becoming enmeshed and entangled with other people and losing ourselves in the process, we become rigidly self-sufficient. We
Hmm.
disdain the approval of others. So I'm just gonna let that land for a second
Yeah.
because
Wow.
this one is me. This one is me.
Hmm.
And I identify as like, anxiously attached and avoidant, which I think is also known as disorganized in some scientific world, but becoming rigidly self-sufficient. So maybe we talk about what rigid self-sufficiency means and how this trait can kind of go in a different direction and express
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah. So when people get rigid, so rigid self-sufficiency is a response to extreme enmeshment and control.
Yes.
That's the first thing we need to remember, that it's almost like a knee-jerk response to
Mm,
when somebody tries to get too close to you, tries to
mhm,
control you, has no boundaries, try to take over your spirit or your emotional self.
mhm.
That's when the avoidance kicks in,
Yeah.
right? And a big example of that is if I'm going to be self-sufficient and I'm going to stay in my lane, then no one's going to come bother me.
Right. No
Nobody
one can
come
hurt me.
take advantage of me. Nobody hurt me. Nobody use me. I'm going to not ask for anything from you, and you hopefully you wouldn't take advantage of me.
Hmm.
I'm going to
Hmm.
go off on my lonely little island and be happy there.
Oh,
Right? Do you go on your island and just like, I'm so happy now?
I'm just laughing because I'm like, oh yeah, this is me. This is me for so long. It was just too painful.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so it's like I was just like, I'm out. I got this. And what I learned is like it's painful on that side too, eventually. It might, and
Yeah.
again, an intelligent strategy,
Yeah.
but it's so painful on that side too, loved how you described that. And it really it's knee-jerk, it's a defense mechanism, and it
Yeah.
helps you avoid a vulnerability of
Yeah.
connection and
Yeah.
of any
Because
potential rejection.
yeah, vulnerability has been so painful. Vulnerability is the reason people get hurt when we open up.
Mhm,
You can get hurt, rejected, invalidated, abandoned. So
mhm,
that's when children learn that if I open up, I'm never going to be vulnerable, right? Because your inner child is like, "Oh, this is too painful.
mhm,
Why would I open up to you just to get pain and suffering and
mhm.
rejection,
Right.
right? It's a form of protection, but it leads to that emotional isolation,
Mhm,
that
mhm,
loneliness, that inability to sustain long, deep, painful relationships.
mhm,
Because relationships were so painful in the past that I just cannot take anymore.
mhm, mhm. Right. And so like in everyday life, this could look like, you're the one that never asks for help,
Hmm.
even when you're overwhelmed, because you don't trust that other people can meet your needs, right?
Yeah.
It can look like isolating emotionally, avoiding deep connections to prevent enmeshment. You're like,
Yeah.
I just want to have fun. I'm
Hmm.
just keeping this casual, or like,
Hmm.
you're presented with an
Yeah,
opportunity.
yeah.
You're like,
Being in it deep, but calling it casual. That's like the
right?
biggest
Like,
avoidant person's like telltale. Like,
yes, that is it.
I've been loving him for 5 years or whatever, right? But it's casual. We
Yeah.
don't know. It's what? But
Yeah, it's
I'm
like,
just,
yeah, it could show up in the romantic relationships, having those emotional walls up.
mhm,
Being in a long-term relationship with emotional wall up. And then, this is one that I have worked on a lot and have made a lot of progress with, but you see any kind of dependency or
mhm.
vulnerability from somebody as a weakness. You judge it as
Yes.
weak. They're weak, they can't do
Mm-hmm.
it. And that can lead to excessive pride in I
Mm-hmm.
can do it on my own, and it can get really warped. For me, I was like, I'm an independent woman, I can do
Yeah.
it on my own. But like that is actually a very subtle way this toxic self-sufficiency can seep in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like when the parent was too clingy and needed emotional support from us and
Mhm.
used us for that. Now, in adulthood, if somebody is clingy, they're weak, they're trying to take advantage of me, they're just too much, I can't handle it, right? So the walls are built because the baggage from the past has not been cleared
Right.
to protect to protect you so that I don't allow you to betray me or hurt me. I don't allow you to be too close.
Mhm.
And how do we keep others at bay? By judging them harshly, by telling them that they're not good enough,
Mm.
or
Mhm.
calling them, well, you did something bad in the past, so I'm gonna hold it,
Mm.
hold it forever
Gosh,
as a
yeah.
resentment, so I don't let you come close to me.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
doing that dance of like, I want it, push and pull, hot and cold,
Mm.
right? So
Mhm.
avoid intimacy so that I'll keep you at a distance, but then the moment you start to leave, I'm gonna do that dance of chasing you.
Totally. Totally.
Right? Even addictions, like people use, human beings use addictions as a way to avoid intimacy and stay rigidly self sufficient. Like
Yeah.
if I'm in pain and suffering, I'd rather go numb with food, right? That's how an avoidant or a self-sufficient person thinks in that I'd rather just go deal with it on my own with addiction than actually sit with another person, open up to them, maybe possibly get rejected by them. Because mostly ACAs attract people who are not quite able to handle our stuff,
Mm.
and that expectation we have to let go of.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
That the other person should be able to be my counselor, my coach, my listen. Yes, but you have to do, they should be supportive, but you have to do the work of breaking down your own walls.
Yeah.
All these romantic songs, they piss me off because they say, oh, somebody will come, you broke my walls down, and then you got me out of my cage. Like, no, break your own walls down. Like,
Oh my
that's what
gosh, don't even get me started on music. I've had to There's a period where I was only listening to like instrumental music. Like I could not listen to lyrics of anything related to like romance and like what pop media was telling. I mean, that could also be another episode. Um,
right.
so okay, Dolly. So we have laid out, these traits,
Mhm.
laundry list, other laundry list. And so let's talk about the flip side. Like what is the transition? What is the healing? What is the recovery? So give us the flip side for this one.
Well, the first one is when you heal, the pain stops, the suffering stops, the
Mhm.
obsession with getting validation and approval, obsession with other people, their mood, what they're saying, how they're doing or treating you, that stops or at least slows down.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know, you become more emotionally and spiritually self-sufficient.
Mhm. Yeah.
Not rigidly, but you become self sufficient emotionally. And you
Mhm.
become grounded in your own sense of self, in your own identity, your own values, preferences, needs, wants, desires, what you're doing. Focus. Like you stay, like what do they say in recovery, right? You stay in your own lane,
Mhm. Yeah. So much freedom in staying in your own lane.
right? And then
Yeah.
you become the first source of approval, validation to yourself, your
Mm.
God. and
Mhm.
you are your first source of approval, validation, love, encouragement,
Mhm.
right?
Right. Yeah.
Mm.
And like we're like gifted with like no like having something to self-identify as an adult child and then gifted with like a whole list of like integrated states.
Mhm.
So this trait that we've been talking about, these two, um, the other side of it really is that you learn to not depend on others to
Yeah,
tell you who you are. And it's
exactly.
specifically worded as we do not depend on others to tell us who we are. And so
Yes.
this integrated state, recovering adult children can accept and appreciate feedback and approval
Mhm.
and not depend on it to define their sense of self. That's
Yeah.
that's really the essence of it. You start to feel comfortable in your own identity and you start to maintain boundaries, as you were saying,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Without a fear of just completely losing yourself. So this
Yes.
is like for
Exactly.
me like a lot of like embodiment work. Like you're like
Mhm.
take like a lot of people are like, what is embodiment? Like it's this
Mhm.
abstract thing. I'm like, it's literally like using your body to do different actions.
Right?
Like you're
Yeah.
just doing it differently and you're taking action. Like that is
Yeah.
embodiment. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that, like living in this flip side trait,
Mhm.
not depending on others to tell us who we are is about the boundaries. It's about
Mhm.
speaking up,
Mhm.
living in this trait. It's like, you're in a family gathering and everyone else has different opinions about your career choice.
Yeah, for example, yeah. Mhm.
Might have like second guessed yourself and try to please them. Oh, maybe I'll switch careers. But now,
Mhm.
living in this flip side trait,
Mhm.
you can listen respectfully, stay in your body, keep
Exactly.
eating your dinner,
Right?
stay grounded in your choice. You don't feel
Mhm.
the need to justify.
Mhm.
You don't feel the need to prove or change your decision based on their
Yeah. Yeah.
insight. That is just like a simple way that
Yeah.
this trait gets to be embodied. What are some other ways that?
Yeah, that you don't absorb their feelings, that you don't internalize the criticism, that you don't take on the belief of them telling you that you're doing something wrong or bad or not good enough, right? You're not enmeshed, you're not following their opinions and taking it in as our own. You have healthy emotional, spiritual boundaries where you separate this is your thoughts, beliefs, and
Mhm,
but this is what my God is guiding me to do and follow. And you
mhm,
say all this embodied, integrated, one with your breath, one with your mind, body, and soul. You're grounded in yourself and you're stating your truth without fear, just with courage and your open heart. Courage
mhm,
and an open heart and
mhm,
discernment and boundaries, right? It
mhm.
all comes with practice, obviously. It comes with a lot of,
Mhm.
right?
Yes, this is not just like oh, I learned about it. It's like it's life practice. Like
Hmm.
messing it up and feeling bad and then trusting yourself again and
Right?
trying again.
Like
It's just like,
for the first time, maybe you'll be able to listen to 2 minutes of their criticism, and then
yes.
you have to walk away. And then later on, you'll just be eating dinner. You won't even hear it. You won't,
Mhm.
right? You accept people with
Mhm.
their limited beliefs and you
Mhm.
leave it at that. You handle rejection with grace.
Oh,
You have
beautiful.
compassion for
Mhm.
their limited abilities and you
Mhm.
have compassion for yourself who's hurting because they're surrounded by ignorance, for example.
Mhm. Yeah,
Right?
love it.
Compassion becomes a big tool on this journey.
Mhm.
Loving kindness, compassion, acceptance, we live in these.
Mhm.
And that's what we're trying to bring to our listeners, people in recovery walking alongside, that we have to remind every day to ourselves to live in compassion and love and kindness towards ourselves. That's our duty. That's not something nice to do. That's your duty to love yourself. Be
Mhm.
compassionate and kind to
Mhm.
yourself.
Mhm. Yeah.
and the God that lives inside of you.
And it might be hard at first, you know? Like
Yeah.
I think I mentioned this on our last episode that like I started learning what you just said around like that's the thing you come to recovery for, to learn how to deeply love yourself and build a relationship with something, someone greater than yourself, right?
Yes.
To
Yes.
depend on that thing and learn to trust in yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I was first learning about that, I was like, I don't know about all. It was hard, but
Yeah.
like I just kept coming,
Mm-hmm.
kept, reading
Mm-hmm.
the literature, sitting in the meetings, and then hearing people's success stories of their
Mm-hmm.
transformation. I think that's another thing I'm really appreciating about what we're doing with this podcast is like we're carrying a certain message, and then other people could be like, oh, there's two people who are saying that it works,
Let's see.
right? Maybe
Yeah.
I can try this for
Yeah.
myself,
Yeah.
right? Even if I don't
Exactly.
believe it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I loved what you just said. That was great. I also was thinking of how, this integrated state can show up in like being able to use your voice to speak up. So we were
Oh
talking
yeah.
about how when you're in the laundry list trait,
Mm-hmm.
it can be hard for you to speak up. You avoid conflict. And when you're in this integrated state, you can say no without feeling a tremendous amount of guilt, right?
Yes. Oh my
You
goodness.
you
Yeah.
have the courage to stand up for your values, but
Mm-hmm.
stay connected to people. So we're not slipping into the rigid self-sufficiency. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
present, I'm
Mm-hmm.
connected, and this is who I am. This is what I
Yes.
believe. Or I disagree, or I'm a no to that, right? And it can show up with like friends and relationships and family. But like that's what it looks like, You
And
don't, yeah.
when you are grounded in your own truth and you speak it from that place of acceptance and groundedness, other people take it as absolute truth. They
Mhm.
do not question you. But when you speak your truth in an iffy manner, when you know you can kind of sort of betray yourself for their approval, then other people will not take you seriously. They will not, they will still consistently cross your boundaries.
Mhm.
So it's so important to accept yourself, love yourself, and stay grounded in your practiced truth. And the more you practice it, easier it gets, right?
Mhm.
Recovery gets easier when you question your negative beliefs and then reframe it with the help of your higher self.
Totally, totally. And you just made me think of this concept of like the more you are in speaking your truth in your identity, people can trust you more too.
Hmm.
And
Hmm. Yeah,
that was like mind blowing for me. I was like, oh, the
yeah.
more authentic I am with myself, people can trust me.
Right? Yeah. If you trust
Yeah.
yourself, that
Yeah.
energy shows up as integrated energy and people can trust you. If I show up filled with self-doubt, then I'm not safe to myself, then the other person's gonna be like, well, this is not safe for me either. And we can just, use or cross over boundaries and just that's when it gets dysfunctional when you are in front of a person who's probably unhealthy and
Mm-hmm.
you show up unhealthy, then it's just gonna be
Right.
so
Right.
recreation of that dysfunction, right?
Yeah, and get to break the cycle with what we're doing here. So I also wanted to fold in the integrated state for this other laundry list
Hmm.
trait that we were talking about, the rigid self-sufficiency. So the flip side of the other laundry list is we realize the sanctuary. I love how
Hmm.
this is worded. The
Yeah.
sanctuary we have built to protect the frightened and injured child within. Oof,
Hmm.
has become a prison, and we become willing to risk moving out of isolation.
Yeah.
So I just love this is so beautifully worded. And this flip side trait really refers to recognizing that these protective mechanisms, like rigid self-sufficiency, avoidance of connection, really are meant to protect and shield that
Hmm.
wounded inner child. So we call ourselves adult children because we have this wounded inner child within that needs healing and integration and guidance. So it's meant to shield and protect that inner child from harm.
Mm-hmm.
And that this sanctuary isn't actually a sanctuary. It's become something that's negative. And so we can move out of this by gaining more awareness that, oh, like these strategies that I've built up aren't actually serving me anymore. And
Yeah.
being willing to take risk vulnerability, risk connection, and be like, I survived.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still here. Because that's
Yeah.
how it feels. It's like I might
Yeah.
be annihilated if I'm
Yeah.
vulnerable. But like
Mm-hmm.
quiet, you speak a
Mm-hmm.
truth, you let somebody know how you feel,
Yeah.
you ask for help,
Mm-hmm.
you have the courage to face fear. And then you realize like it's okay. And then you try it again.
Mm-hmm.
And you try it again. And then maybe that time you got some feedback that didn't feel good,
Mm-hmm.
but you're trying it. And that's how it transformed. Would you add anything to that?
Yeah, like healing, like you're saying, being self-aware that your sanctuary that you were hiding from other people thought you were protecting yourself has now become a self-imposed prison. The
Mhm.
effect of loneliness will put you in crisis. It
Mhm.
will affect your health. The loneliness, even solitude is great, right? Like you talk about a difference between solitude and loneliness. Solitude is
Mhm.
when you're positively nurturing yourself in your me time. It's something your soul enjoys.
Mhm.
But what we're talking about is that self imposed prison where you're isolating and hiding from others in hope or trying to, because you're trying to protect yourself from their feelings or their demands, or you think you'll get hurt, and it's really scary world out there. So
Mhm.
like Michelle is saying, the first step is going to be acceptance that this rigidity is not serving me
Mhm.
anymore.
Mhm.
Where understanding the roots of it, where does this come from? Did I start becoming self-sufficient to avoid others because nobody was there to take care of me
Mhm.
and I had to step up, right? And like you're saying, start small, practice, communicate your needs to yourself. So
Mhm.
many times avoidance deny their own needs, even basic human needs. ACAs, we deny our needs, we
Mhm.
suppress our needs. So
Mhm.
start to look at what are my needs physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially. How
Mhm.
do I want my body to
Mhm.
feel, my life to look like, or how do I live in my body as I'm living my life, right?
I love that. I love that. And like that can be the hardest question. It's like anytime
Yeah.
I'm like running anything with coaching and I or working with a client, and we always start with needs.
Hmm.
Always start with needs because the needs are the pathway to the healthy and fulfilled life.
Exactly.
Like, think about it. Like, you have needs and you're not getting them met.
Hmm.
What is your life going to feel like? It's not going to feel great. You
Mm-mm.
have needs and you're getting them met, whether it's I need water, I need food, I need connection, I
Yes.
need a sense of purpose, and you're taking action to meet that, your life is going to be good.
And can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
People need to stop feeling guilty for
Mm,
wanting love and connection, just human emotional needs met. If you're getting rejected by somebody and they're not meeting your emotional needs, all it means is that it's not a good match. Then
yeah.
you get your needs met wherever, in a healthy manner, right? With other people, other connection. But you have to recognize that you cannot force somebody or manipulate them or love them too much in order to get those needs met. And but getting your needs met is your duty, is how we heal. And if your needs are not met, is when we do those desperate things that land us in sickness or bad consequences, right?
Yeah,
And
I
another piece of that I wanted to add real quick is, everybody has a trigger. that lends them to be anxiously chasing somebody
Mm.
or anxiously chasing that approval. And people who are avoidant also have a trigger when a partner comes at them with big overwhelming emotional need, or a boss puts too much pressure on them with demand, right? So get to know your triggers. Your triggers are your entry point for healing,
Mhm.
right? What do you think, Michelle?
Oh my gosh. Yes, what you're talking about, the trigger with the person who like backs away, that's like there's a deep fear. It's the
Mm,
fear of like the engulfment. It's the fear of the being smothered,
yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So that, if you're starting to do this work, is looking at like, oh, like what was it like with my caregiver? Did I have a caregiver that was like very smothering? And so now in my relationships, I'm rigidly self-sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
Or is it in the opposite direction? I
Mm-hmm.
had a caregiver who was not as available emotionally or physically or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was like searching for the love, but then I got the message like, no, you shouldn't be needy like that, right?
Yeah.
And so now that shows up in your
Mm-hmm.
relationship. So these like knowing your triggers, exactly what you said, Dolly, is so important to starting to really transform this stuff. And I think that's what the step work does. It allows you a very systematic and gentle, but not always easy
Mm-hmm.
pathway for this self-reflection, deep self-reflection, looking at your history and seeing how you came to be. Because none of this is random. You didn't just
Right.
wake up
Yeah.
one day and have this chaos in your
Yeah.
life,
Right.
have these kinds of
Yeah.
relationships. And like that's what like looking at these laundry list traits and working the steps offers. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And then when you do the work, you will realize that, all, like Michelle's saying, it just didn't one day happen that you're anxious or avoidant or approval seeker or chasing somebody. This is based in old beliefs that you picked up
Mhm.
in your childhood or inherited it from your parents or grandparents or other caregivers around you. So,
Mhm.
important thing to notice is when you see your triggers, find out which needs are not being met and it's causing you to spiral, but also find out what is the belief, what is
Mhm.
the negative belief that is making me think that I am not worthy, I will get rejected, so I better seek that approval. I'm not worthy, I won't get love, so I better take care of myself and not let anybody, I can't trust others, so I
Mhm.
can't don't allow others, right? So all this is based in belief system,
Mhm.
beliefs that we inherited from our family of origin. And that is why 12 steps, like Michelle is saying, systematic approach to healing, to unpacking those old beliefs, unpacking those old wounds from childhood that are generations old,
Mhm.
right? And then 12 step also helps us let go of that feeling of I'm the only one who's broken, I'm the only one who's in pain and suffering,
Mhm.
right? So next time you catch yourself thinking I'm in this alone, or any type of negative belief, challenge that
Mhm.
belief.
Yeah.
Is it really true, or is it coming from my family of origin
Mm. I love that. I love
stuff?
that.
Yeah.
Just like, yeah, it feels like we're like kind of coming to the end of this like deep dive on trait two, which really felt like a deep dive.
Yeah.
Um, 12 step, all the things that you said is available in recovery in this program. And the thing that I think sets 12-step recovery sort of different with this like trauma healing work is that the spirituality aspect of it, and I
Hmm.
know we'll talk more about this as we get on through our episodes, just that like the foundation is like it's a spiritual program, and that doesn't necessarily mean you have to believe in a certain thing. The
Hmm.
beauty is that like you get to build this relationship,
Yeah.
this spiritual connection that supports you through this
Yes.
trauma work.
Yes.
I
Yes.
remember doing like my fourth step and feeling like I had some force gently guiding me
Kind.
along the way because this is not easy work.
Yeah.
So that is why I have come and I have stayed and I have gone to lots of houses on the block to work with
Yeah.
lots. And
Yeah.
like this is the one that like was the last stop for
It's,
me.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right? And it's because of that. Okay, we're doing this deep work. It is like mindset, it is looking at emotional patterns, and it is like the spiritual aspect too. All
Hmm.
three of those together have been the game changer for me.
Yeah. Yes, and that's what we hope to bring to you,
Mhm.
community and experience, strength and hope, and exploring our wisdom so you can pick up some nuggets and walk in recovery with us.
Mhm.
So, do you feel complete? Are we good?
We
So,
there's
thank you
lots
everyone
of
for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Alrighty, so we'll pick up the next trait next time. Thank you. Bye bye.